Hello Year 6 and welcome to your history lesson for today. So today we're going to carry on with the Vikings and we're looking at today what did the Vikings believe. So we're going to focus today on how were the Viking beliefs different to Anglo-Saxons, who were at the time majority Christian. What did the Vikings believe and how did it affect their lives? So that's what we're going to have a look at today. So just to start off with a couple of quick questions to get you thinking. What do you think the Vikings believed? Have a little think. I think you know from what we've said previously that Vikings didn't start off as Christian. Some Vikings did become Christian as the sort of era unfolded and as they became as they lived in England for longer and longer, some did take on Christianity, but not all did. And also that's not the religion that they started off with. So what do you think they believed? So I've got a couple of quick questions that they can answer. Have a little think and then we'll talk about it together. Okay, so we're going to move on and we're going to have a look at what Vikings believe now. So we've got a quick little video to share with you and then we will talk through it. Okay, so we're going to have a look here. This is on BBC Bitesize, so if you want to look at it later on, you can do. So it's just a very short video, but we're just looking at when Vikings arrived in Scotland. They introduced their own religion and their beliefs. Vikings worshipped powerful gods and believed about that bravery, when alive, promised them a better life after they died. So let's have a quick look at this video.
The Vikings in Scotland. Believing. My name's Anita. Johnny, a local guide, is sleeping in the next tent. I'm in a tent with my mum. She's a professor studying the Vikings. And we're on the Isle of Skye at a place called Ruandunan. Vikings used to live here. And I've got one question. Mum, did the Vikings believe in heaven? Mum, did the Vikings believe in heaven?
Valhalla! The Vikings believed in Valhalla!
Valhalla means Hall of the Dead, and if Vikings died in battle, Valkyries, which are like warrior women angels, would scoop up the souls of the warriors and take them to the god Odin's hall for a big feast. But some were taken to a nice field by the goddess Freya, and some went to the underworld, which the Vikings called Hell.
Hell?
It wasn't a bad place, and not hot. It was only Christians later that said that hell was bad and scary. Being alive was scary enough. The Vikings believed that the things you needed in life were also needed in death. A sword, a whetstone to sharpen his sword, a necklace with amber beads, and his favourite silver brooch to keep his cloak pinned together. Every Viking wants to look their best when going to meet their gods. Gods? The Vikings believed in not one god, but many, and we remember them to this day through the English names for days of the week. Tyr's Day, Woden's Day, Thor's Day, and Freyr's Day.
Mum,
Yes?
are you looking for Viking graves?
Oh yes, graves are filled with objects. It's how we know so much about the Vikings. What they owned, where they travelled, everything. There's probably Viking graves all around here. We just haven't found them yet. Now, go to sleep. You could wake the dead with all your chatter.
Okay, so we had a little look at that through that video and then just a couple of questions for you. So what did Vikings believe happened to them when they died? And did the Vikings, believe in a god? Okay, have a little think, pause this video, answer it, and then we'll come back to it. Okay, so what does the Vikings believe happened to them when they died? We'll go into this in a little bit more detail. Vikings did believe in an afterlife, in somewhere that you would go after you died, and that would depend on what you sort of did with your life. So they believed in if you died in battle, then there was a special place for you to go. And if you didn't die in battle, then there was another place to go, which they called in the video Hell, which is also called Helheim, which again we'll come on to a little bit more. So they definitely believed in some sort of afterlife that you would go to after you died, and it was dependent on sort of what you were doing with your life and what you'd done. Did the Vikings believe in a god? They did, but they didn't just believe in one god, they believed in many gods. Okay. So the Vikings believed in many different gods. They believed that the gods and goddesses were like them and they looked like normal people. So in lots of religions, and especially like older religions, if you think about other ancient civilizations you might have learned about earlier on in school. Their gods and goddesses are thought to be quite different to regular humans, I suppose, or like maybe they're bigger or they can transform themselves and something like that. But the Vikings didn't believe that necessarily. They believed that their gods looked like them and that their gods were just like them, and they were normal. And these gods are quite often called the Norse gods, which means the gods of the north, because if you think about Scandinavia, it's in the north, so Norse gods, gods of the north. I just put, is this similar to any of the other ancient civilizations you've learned about? So you might want to pause this video and have a little think. Think back to other years that you might have done, and do you know any other ancient civilizations that had many gods and not just one? Okay, so it's actually similar to quite a few different civilizations, especially sort of ancient civilizations. So it's quite similar to the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans. They both had they're very similar gods. Their religion is kind of interwoven, and the names change when you go from ancient Greek to ancient Roman, but their gods tend to be quite similar. There's only a few that are significantly different, like the god of war. So they both believed in many different gods, and then also the ancient Egyptians had, well, their belief system was quite different, but they also believed in many different gods, not just one. So there's a few ancient civilizations that believed in that, and Vikings is just one of many that didn't just believe in one god, or wasn't sort of one of the more modern religions that we think of now when we think of like maybe Christianity. Okay. Right, so we're going to look at some of the Norse gods now. Now, if we were in school, I'd set this as a research task straight away for you to go and have a look at. But because we're not at school, I'm going to talk you through some of the Norse gods and then set your research task after. So we're going to first start off. You'll recognize all these names, by the way, and you'll recognize them from the Avengers and from movies. And we can talk about that a little bit later. So first of all, you've got, of the Norse gods, you've got Odin, also known as, I think it's Woden, which is, they were saying in the video, that's like where the day Wednesday comes from. He's the god of poetry, wine, knowledge, and war, as well as the ruler of the gods. So if you think like ancient Greeks, they tended to just have one thing they were in charge of, whereas it's a bit different here. They tend to have a few different things they're in charge of. Odin was sometimes called the raven god because he had two ravens who sat on him, one on each shoulder, and you can see him on this picture here, one there and one there. They were named Hugin, which is fort, and Muin, which is mind. Every day Hugin and Muin flow around the Viking world, spying on the humans and the creatures and the gods, because that was another thing they believed in. They believed in creatures like trolls and giants as well. So they believed in lots of different things. They returned to Odin each evening and reported everything they saw, like the tattletales they were. So they used to tell on the humans and say that what was happening. Now you've got Thor. Again, you obviously know him from the Avengers. And Thor was Odin's son, so the son of Odin, and Thor, it kind of leads you to Thursday, so the day Thursday comes from Thor's day. Thor was the god of strength in thunder, storms, and big muscles. He had a magic bell, a magic hammer, iron gloves, and a chariot pulled by two goats named Toothgnasher and Toothgrinder. So some of that is very similar to what you might have know just because you've watched Avengers or read the comics. And some of it's quite different. So he was the god of thunder, but there was also different things that he was the god of, like strength and storms as well. And he did have a magic hammer, but he also had a magical belt too. Okay, then we've got Loki. So Loki is Odin's adopted son. Loki was a trickster, which is very similar to in the Avengers. He's a mischief maker and a shapeshifter. In different Norse myths, Loki turned himself into a fly, a horse, a fish, and a woman, and a seal to trick someone. Loki loved pranks. Some of his pranks caused death, like the time he tricked Odin's wife into telling him how to kill the god Balder. So Loki was kind of a naughty one. He liked pulling tricks on people. He liked having a laugh. That was sort of Loki, which again, they all come from the comics. And the reason for that is very simple. The writers who wrote the comics for Thor based it off Norse legends. So a lot of these names you'll know if you've watched the Thor movies or you've read the Thor comics, because they're all characters that are in the comics. Everything in the movie Thor is based off of not obviously the modern day stuff, but the stuff where they're in the with Odin and Loki and etc. All of that is very much related to the Norse legends. So there's a lot of like legend within that. So it's interesting, isn't it? And then you've got the goddess Sif. Now Sif is in Thor as well. She is the goddess of the harvest, and she was Thor's wife. She was very proud of her long blonde hair. One day, as a prank, Loki cut off her beautiful hair, and Sif was so sad she cried tears so heavy with salt that her tears fell on Middle Earth, and the crops wouldn't grow. To fix this, and to avoid an angry beating by Thor, Loki asked the dwarves to spin her some new hair, which fortunately for Loki, they did. Okay, then you've got Freya and Frey. Sometimes it's spelled a bit differently with a J, but it's the same name. So they were sister and brother. Freya was the goddess of fertility, growth, love, and war. She cried golden tears when she was unhappy, which was quite often. It made her unhappy to see Viking warriors fallen in war. Odin allowed Freya to help only half of the fallen Viking warriors to recover from the wounds. So Freya's job was to she picked the best warriors and she took them to her special afterworld sort of thing, so a special like sort of heaven that was for like good warriors, I suppose, but she was only allowed to pick half, so she could heal half of the wounded soldiers and the other half she could take to like the afterworld. There was also Frey, who was in charge of the dwarves and the elves. Frey had a ship that folded into his pocket and a magic sword that could fight on its own. Then you've also got Idun, who was the goddess of youth and beauty. She grew the golden apples that all the Norse gods had to eat regularly to stay young, healthy, and strong. Without Idun's golden apples to eat, the gods would quickly age and become old. Ultimately, they became old anyway, but the apples gave them a very long life. Okay, so we've sort of introduced them. So I introduced you some of the sort of male gods and the female goddesses, but there are obviously a lot more than these few. So if you want to look at it, there's loads more. Right, so we're going to have a quick look at Afterlife because this leads into their belief system. So we know already that Vikings valued battle. And to them, it was a great honour to die in battle. And to die in battle, especially if you fought well, was a good thing and something to be proud of. That's really important. So this is one of their afterlives was called Valhalla. Now, Valhalla is the most known of their afterlife. And again, you might recognise the name of Valhalla. Valhalla was thought to be the great hall in Asgard, the home of the Norse gods. So Asgard, again, you will know that from the 4 movies. This hall belonged to Odin, the king of the Norse gods and the god of war and wisdom. So Valkyries, which were kind of like angels, like warrior angels, they would come and they would choose fallen heroes from the battlefield to go and live in Valhalla. So they would take people who died in battle and take them to Valhalla. There, the dead heroes would feast and fight until the arrival of Ragnarok, the end of the world, which they would fight along Odin and the other Norse gods in the final battle. You could only go to Valhalla if you died in battle. So if you didn't die in battle, you couldn't go to Valhalla. And that's important to note as well. Right, I'm not 100% sure how to say this one. Folkvanga, I'm going to go with, is the home of the goddess of Freya, who was the goddess of fertility and magic, if we just looked at. She took fallen famous Viking warriors. So she took basically the best Viking warriors, the ones that were most well known from the battlefield. She got first choice, so she picked the ones that she wanted to have in her afterlife, in Volvanga. So she wouldn't pick everyone, she'd only pick a certain few. This is less famous than less famous than Valhalla. Most people have heard of Valhalla. People won't have heard of this one. But actually, it was a greater honor to go here, to go to Folkvanga, than it was to go to Valhalla, because this was like only for some warriors, whereas all warriors who died in battle would go to Valhalla. Only some would get to here. So it was like, think of it as like a tier system as an afterlife. This is like here. And Valhalla's like here, and then Folkvanga's above it. That's like a better place to be. And then there's also Helheim. So Helheim, it has sort of the root of hell. So some people think that that's like a bad thing, because obviously like Christian hell is not a good place. It's a place you go if you're bad. Whereas this one, Helheim, if you didn't die in battle, which was a lot of Vikings, lots of Vikings would die of old age, would die of illnesses, or they might be a woman that wasn't fighting or a man that wasn't fighting. They would find themselves in Helheim, which was ruled over by the goddess of hell, which is where the name Helheim comes from, because the goddess of hell. Once a soul passes into Helheim, it can't return. So the idea of Folkvanga and Valhalla was that at the end of the world, when there was Ragnarok, which is what the Vikings believed, the warriors would be able to come back and help the gods to fight. Whereas Helheim, it was a one-way trip. If you died and you went to Helheim, you weren't coming back. It wasn't like hell at all. It was not a place for the wicked, but it was an afterlife for anyone who did not die in battle. Now, there was a subsection that I haven't put on here actually of Helheim, which was for bad people, the people that did bad things, but that I didn't believe that Helheim itself was bad. It was called the underworld, so underground, but then lots of different, like even the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans, they had the underworld, but the underworld, that's where they believed the dead went, but they didn't believe it was necessarily bad. So that's important to note as well. That's different to sort of different other religions that we might know more about. So I put the question of, why do you think Vikings believed battle was important? Well, their afterlife depended on it. If they died in battle and they proved themselves worthy, they could go to a good afterlife, which is what they wanted. And the idea that they could one day come back to life to fight with the gods, that's a really good thing, isn't it? So they wanted that. So that's why they wanted to be warriors, and that's why being a warrior was so important to Vikings. Right, so I'm setting you up with your task now. Your task is to choose a Viking god or goddess. Now, I've put a list of them on your sheet, but there are others that you could pick from. So, for example, Hel, I didn't put that on the sheet, but you could pick Hel and look into her a little bit more if you're interested in that. And when you think about what were they the god of? Why did the Vikings think they were important? And then did Vikings worship their gods? Now, this is an interesting one to me because how maybe we think about worshipping gods and stuff like that, it's different for different civilizations and for different belief systems. So it's interesting to me to find out a little bit more about what the Vikings did. Because what I'm interested in is, did they sort of pray to their gods? Is that something they believed in? Or did they, some religions give like offerings? So did they give offerings to their religion? You know, like in Torak in Wolf Brother, where he gives like an offering to his clan spirit. Is it like that? Do you have to give an offering, or I don't know? So I kind of want to know a little bit more about that. So if you could do some research. When you're doing this research, I suggest you've gotten loads better with computers now. So you can Google it, but I would just suggest putting for kids in, just so the information you're getting is more appropriate for your level. Okay. And just find out anything you can about any of these different gods. And I'm really going to look forward to reading them because I didn't have time to research them all myself. So now you guys get to do it. If we were in school, then the task would be to then present that information back to the rest of the class. Obviously, we can't do that with you being at home, which is a bit of a shame because I think it's a really nice learning opportunity for you. But hopefully when we're back next week, we'll be able to start doing stuff like that again. Right, that's it for this lesson. I hope you've learned something interesting and hope you've enjoyed it. I'll see you later. Bye.